I'm Sienna Clark. I'm 34 years old. Last month, I canceled a $12,000 client meeting just to show up for a family vacation, only to find out I wasn't even on the guest list. Not forgotten, just omitted. They smiled through me like I was a stranger in their highlight reel. And when I booked my own room, again, paid for my own seat, again, and stood waiting at a dinner table that never welcomed me, I realized this wasn't an oversight. This was tradition. But what they didn't know is that I'd already built a world outside of their invitations, a world that knew my name, not my silence. Before I tell you how a folding chair, a chocolate torte, and a self-addressed letter cracked open a lifetime of performance, tell me where you're watching from. Drop a comment if you've ever stayed too long at a table that never set a place for you. And hit subscribe for more stories where dignity doesn't beg to be seen. It walks out on its own terms. This story isn't about revenge. It's about what happens when you stop auditioning for a role you never agreed to play. The air inside the Golden Shore Resort was thick with lavender-scented coolness, the kind you only find in overmarketed brochures and overpriced spas. Outside, the Florida sun blazed through palm shadows on polished stone tiles. I was still wearing the blazer from my flight, crease-proof, brand new, and clinging to my back from the heat, when I saw them. Lauren stood at the check-in desk, laughing effortlessly. Her voice rose like the chime of silverware on fine china. Delicate, crisp, drawing attention. Matt stood beside her, carrying Emily on his hip. Janet, my mother, was smiling in that careful way she always did when around hotel staff. Chin slightly up, hands folded neatly like she was auditioning for an invisible camera. I took a breath, slid my suitcase behind me, and smiled like I belonged. "Hi," I said, walking up. "Flight was easy. Good to see you all." Lauren barely flicked a glance toward me. "Sienna, you made it," she said, then turned back to the concierge. "We'll need extra towels. Emily has sensitive skin." Janet greeted me with an air kiss that landed in the space between us. "Darling, you're glowing. Florida suits you." "Thanks," I said. "Has everyone checked in?" "Yes," Janet replied, gesturing toward a bellhop. "Just waiting on our keys." I nodded and wheeled my suitcase toward the other concierge. "Hi, I'm with the Clark family. Sienna Clark." The young man's fingers tapped the keyboard. He frowned. "Could you try again?" I asked, tone polite, the way I always was when things started to go sideways. He checked again. Still nothing. "I'm sorry," he said. "There's no reservation under your name or connected to the Clark group." Behind me, I heard Janet's voice float in. "Oh, I'm sure that's just a glitch. It's probably under mine. Can you check Janet Clark?" A pause. More typing. He nodded. "Yes, we have 2 suites under Janet Clark. One under Lauren Matthews." I forced a smile. "So maybe mine's attached to one of those?" He checked, then shook his head. "Unfortunately, no. The suites listed are accounted for. No additional guest is included." There was a beat of silence behind me. When I turned, Lauren was scrolling on her phone. Matt had wandered off toward the lobby bar with Emily. Janet was still smiling, but her eyes were scanning the floral arrangement beside the check-in desk like it had personally disappointed her. "I'm sure this can be sorted," I said quietly. "It's not a problem. I'll just book something for tonight." "No need to make a fuss," Janet replied quickly. "It's just a small error. They always mess things up with large groups." I stared at her. "It's 4 people." She shrugged. I swallowed, looked back at the concierge, and paid for a standard Ocean View King, out of pocket without blinking. This wasn't the first time something like this had happened. Last year, I'd covered everyone's flights to Denver, just because Janet said she forgot her wallet when booking. They never mentioned it again. Not even a thank you. I shouldn't have expected this year to be different, but I also didn't think it would be worse. The bellhop handed me my key. "Room 604, he said with a smile. Janet had drifted away by then. Lauren was already halfway to the elevators, trailing behind the bellhop assigned to her. I adjusted my bag strap and followed. We stood in awkward silence as the elevator arrived. When the doors slid open, Lauren turned slightly and pressed the button for her floor. I didn't say anything. Neither did she. Inside the elevator, the music was a soft jazz loop that made everything feel more surreal. My heart was beating faster than I liked. I hated this part. The in-between moments where disappointment had settled but anger hadn't arrived yet. The thing is, I'm not new to discomfort. In business, I've sat across from men twice my age and calmly doubled their projections with a 2-slide pitch deck. I've landed contracts in boardrooms where they called me kiddo and then called me ma'am 2 quarters later. But family? That's different. Family is supposed to know you. I had postponed a brand strategy meeting that would have brought in $12,000. Just to be here. Just to show up. Again. Like I always do. Hoping that this time, someone would make space for me without asking. I stepped out onto the 6th floor. The hallway was quiet, sterile, ocean-themed. As I rolled my suitcase toward the elevators, I heard my mother's voice behind me, muffled but unmistakably clear. Well, she's always been dramatic. Dinner was at 7. By 7:02, I was the only one standing. Again. The lobby smelled like lemon polish and tourist-grade perfume. My heels clicked against the marble floor as I checked the time. 7:03 now. I'd just gotten off a work call. Client crisis in London, branding launch delayed. And the irony wasn't lost on me. I could put out international fires, but I couldn't manage a peaceful family dinner. Ocean View Hall was at the back of the resort, perched right above the dunes, where the windows looked out on a sea so still it seemed staged. Through the glass, the horizon melted into hues of coral and pewter. Inside, everything was textbook elegance. White linen, crystal stemware, low-hanging chandeliers that turned every wine glass into a prism. A hostess with a name tag that read Kelsey looked up from her iPad. "Clark party," I said, brushing a loose strand of hair from my cheek. Kelsey scanned her screen, lips tightening. "They've already been seated," she said. Her voice dipped in pity. "But I don't see your name on the list." I blinked. "I'm with the family. Sienna Clark." She tilted the iPad toward me as if proof would ease the sting. The list had 4 names: Janet, Lauren, Matt, and a toddler-sized note for a high chair. No Sienna. "I'll double-check," she offered, though it sounded more like an apology than a solution. Before she could turn, I spotted them. My family, seated at the far end of the room. Lauren's hair gleamed under the chandeliers. Janet was mid-sip from her wine glass. Matt was cutting up Emily's chicken into tiny, precise squares. I waved. Lauren noticed me. She smiled like I was a stranger. I walked over. "Hey, they didn't list me on the reservation." Janet lowered her glass. "Did you RSVP?" The words landed like ice chips. It's family dinner. "Well, the resort asked us to confirm head counts," she said, glancing back at her plate. "We had to be precise. Space is tight." Lauren leaned toward her wine. "Maybe you should have double-checked with Mom." Her voice was feather-light, but each syllable sliced clean. I stood there, waiting, for someone to stand up, to shift a chair, to say, "This isn't right." No one did. Emily piped up, her small voice curious and cutting in equal measure. "Why does Aunt Sienna always sit at the edge?" Janet gave a small laugh. "She likes to be dramatic." A busboy appeared, sensing the tension, and offered a folding chair. He set it just slightly away from the table. No placemat, no napkin, no bread plate. I sat. From this angle, I could see the whole dining room reflected in the mirrored wall. I looked at our table. How cohesive it was without me. Someone poured me water. No one spoke to me for a full 7 minutes. The conversation circled around new house paint colors, Emily's ballet recital, a joke Matt told that only Lauren found funny. I sipped my water and tasted nothing. Then I heard it. low but not private. She always wants to make things difficult. Janet. Her voice. And not a single person corrected her. I stared at the butter dish. My appetite vanished. The air felt suddenly dense. My chair scraped softly against the tile as I stood. No one looked up. I walked out, past the hostess, past the polished lobby, past a couple arguing over parking fees. Outside, the night had cooled. The ocean wind whipped against my bare arms. I pulled out my phone, thumb hovering over hotel booking apps. I wasn't staying one more night at Golden Shore. Not with them. Not in a place where my name disappeared from lists like I had never been on them to begin with. I didn't slam the chair back. I didn't raise my voice. I just stood up and left. Outside the Ocean View Hall, the air still carried traces of grilled snapper and citrus vinaigrette. My heels clicked against the stone path leading to Sea Salt, the resort's premier dining spot, perched on the edge of the water like it was too refined for the rest of Florida. I walked slower than usual, not because I wanted to be late, but because I already knew. Inside, Sea Salt glowed in amber tones. Live piano drifted from the corner. Something melancholy dressed up as elegance. Candles flickered on tables dressed in cream. And there they were, my family, framed perfectly under a chandelier shaped like shattered glass frozen midair. Lauren laughed. Her hand rested on Matt's wrist, possessive in a way she'd always been. Janet lifted her wine glass for a toast I hadn't been invited to. My seat, third from the left, always mine, wasn't there. Not even a folding chair this time. I stood there. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3. Not a glance, not a flinch. The waitress nearby offered a polite nod, her eyes darting between me and the table like she sensed something wasn't right, but had learned not to ask questions that didn't involve the menu. Janet twirled her fork in risotto. Lauren scrolled through her phone, blue light flickering on her cheekbones. I adjusted my purse strap, took one step back, then another. By the time I reached the restaurant's exit, the pianist had transitioned into something upbeat. Mocking, almost. Outside, I opened my phone and ordered a taxi. Estimated arrival, 3 minutes. I opened the family group chat. Thumb hovering, breath caught. Then I typed, "Please don't call. I'm not coming back. Sent." It felt surgical. Final. The wind pushed my hair across my face as I made my way toward the lobby. The lights of the resort blurred at the edges of my vision. Not from tears, but from the strange clarity that only arrives when something inside you finally breaks. The valet podium was empty. I leaned against a pillar, ignoring the curious glance from a couple arguing over spa charges. Somewhere behind me, laughter erupted from Sea Salt. A black sedan pulled up. The driver stepped out without a word, opened the door. Just as I slipped into the back seat, a young waitress ran toward me, slightly breathless, holding a small white box. "Wait," she said. "Your sister said you might want this. The dessert. Chocolate torte." I looked at the box, then at her. She didn't meet my eyes for long, just long enough to look sorry without knowing why. I shook my head. "Keep it," I said gently. "You probably need it more than I do." She hesitated, then nodded and stepped back. The door shut. The driver glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "Where to?" "Anywhere that's not here," I murmured, then gave him the name of a boutique hotel 2 towns over. As we pulled away, the lights of the Golden Shore Resort grew smaller, then faded entirely behind the dunes and palms. I watched in silence, arms crossed against the night chill. "That was the last supper," I said quietly, to no one in particular, and entirely to myself. I didn't downgrade. I upgraded. Quietly. The Viridian Heights lobby greeted me with silence so luxurious it almost sang. No clattering dishes, no shrieking children, no passive-aggressive smiles. Just the low hum of ambient jazz and a subtle citrus scent hanging in the air. It was like stepping into another timeline, one where I hadn't canceled a $12,000 client call to be forgotten at dinner. Marcus was behind the front desk, dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, his posture straight but not stiff. He looked up and smiled with familiarity rather than performance. "Miss Clark," he said, his voice smooth as polished marble. "Back for another creative reset?" I exhaled in something that felt like relief. "Something like that." He clicked away at the screen, then leaned in slightly. "We've gone ahead and upgraded you to the corner suite. No charge. Rooftop access, of course." A second later, a black keycard slid across the counter toward me with a sound like resolution. The suite didn't just smell better. It breathed better. Cream walls, brushed gold accents, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the sea. There was a handwritten card on the nightstand. "Welcome home." I dropped my bag and toed off my heels. The mattress welcomed me like an old friend. For the first time in days, I didn't feel the need to explain why I was tired. Later, I found myself on the rooftop bar, cradling a glass of elderflower spritz, legs curled under me as the last blush of daylight slid beneath the horizon. The pool shimmered beside me like liquid silver. No kids, no shrugs, no folding chairs. My phone vibrated against the table. Voicemail from Mom. I didn't play it. I didn't need to hear the dissonant blend of concern and condescension. It would be some variation of, "We didn't mean to. It's not a big deal. You're too sensitive." Another buzz. A text from Lauren. "Mom's freaking out. You could have just said something." I laughed, quiet and bitter, and typed back, "I've said enough over the years." No one listened. I let the message sit there for a second, then hit send. A little blue dot blinked for delivery confirmation, and for once, I didn't wait for the reply. I leaned back and looked at the sky, no longer burdened by the need to be understood by people who refused to see me. I let the silence wrap around me like cashmere. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps against the suite door, just enough to pull me back from peace. I opened it to find Marcus standing there, holding a small, flat parcel. No envelope. Just a wrapped package with my name handwritten in my own script. He tilted his head, unsure. "This arrived by express courier. From you, apparently. Sent the day before your check-in." He handed it to me carefully, as if it were fragile. And it was. Back inside, I sat at the window seat, unwrapping the parcel. Inside was a single folded note, dated 3 days ago. "In case I forget who I am." No signature. Just my handwriting, elegant and even. The same ink I always used for journaling. I stared at the words like they were a mirror, one that finally refused to lie. I folded the paper again, held it close for a second, then slid it into the bedside drawer without another word. Outside, the pool glistened like a secret kept just for me. I thought I'd bought myself peace, but peace doesn't last when your last name is Clark. The Viridian Heights lobby was unusually quiet for a Thursday morning. A jazz trio had taken up residence in the corner, their notes low and warm, curling into the air like incense. I was halfway through my second espresso, flipping absently through an article on brand psychology when I saw them. Janet first, always the ambassador of unwanted concern. Her heels clicked against the polished tile, her purse clutched high like a weaponized accessory. Lauren followed, head slightly bowed, fingers twisted in front of her like she was rehearsing a confession. Neither of them looked like they belonged here. Their brightness was just a little too forced, their clothes too loud for this place. I didn't stand. I didn't even close my laptop. "We thought we'd surprise you," Janet said, smiling in a way that didn't touch her eyes. "You did," I replied, setting my cup down with surgical care. Lauren offered a small wave. "Hi," she said, her voice tentative, childlike. "This place is beautiful." I nodded once. "It is." An awkward silence folded in between us, padded only by the faint sound of a saxophone and someone typing across the room. "We just want things to go back to normal," Janet said finally. Her tone was soft, but beneath it was a scaffolding of expectation, as if she were handing me a script and waiting for me to read my lines. Normal for you, I said, diminishing for me. Her lips tightened. Sienna. I shook my head gently. You came uninvited. Let's not pretend this is about reconciliation. It's about control. Janet blinked. Lauren stepped forward, her eyes glistening. I didn't realize it hurt that much, she said. I thought you were just strong enough not to care. I exhaled slowly. That's the thing about being the strong one. People assume pain doesn't stick. A beat. Janet glanced toward the elevator. Why don't we go upstairs? Talk in private. I made a reservation at that little seafood place by the water. Just the three of us. I'm not hungry, I said. And I like it here. Out in the open. Marcus walked past at that moment, a quiet sentinel behind the front desk. He didn't interrupt, but his glance met mine just long enough to steady me. I reached into my bag and pulled out the envelope from 2 nights ago, the one I'd mailed to myself. I unfolded the letter slowly, letting the moment breathe. Then I read aloud. I deserve rooms I'm invited into, not ones I have to beg for. The words hung in the air like smoke, and neither of them moved to extinguish it. Janet cleared her throat, eyes narrowed slightly. If you're going to hold on to every little slight, you'll never move forward. I folded the letter again, tucking it away. Then maybe forward doesn't include you. She turned sharply and walked toward the exit, her heels stabbing the floor like punctuation. Lauren stayed. Her hands trembled slightly, voice low. Can I come back tomorrow? Just me? I didn't answer right away. Just met her eyes. And for the first time in years, I saw something break past the practiced ease. Something real. We'll see, I said, voice level. As she nodded and turned away, I picked up my espresso again. Still warm, still mine. She came back the next day, without flowers, without excuses, just honesty. The terrace was bathed in the kind of golden light that made everything look kinder than it really was. Early morning sun skimmed the glass railing, turning the ocean into a page of shifting silver. I had taken my usual seat near the edge, a pot of tea steaming softly beside me, my notebook open but blank. I didn't expect her to come. But Lauren did. She walked out in flats, wearing a navy cardigan I remembered from years ago, back when she borrowed my things without asking. She didn't wave, didn't smile. Just sat across from me, folding her hands on the table like she was afraid they might say the wrong thing before her mouth could. Just me, she said again, gently. That was the only reason I didn't stand up and leave. We sat in silence for a moment. No background violin, no resort staff checking in. Just the wind and the smell of salt and the soft, deliberate clinking of her bracelets as she adjusted them nervously. You always looked strong, she said finally. I assumed you were fine. I poured more tea and didn't look up. And I assumed you'd ask. Her breath caught slightly, but she nodded. I didn't know what it looked like. Being sidelined, she added. Not really. Not until I watched you walk away. I let the words sit between us like a guest neither of us had invited. I don't need you to fix it, I said, my voice calm. I just need you to see it. She did. This time she did. We talked, not about Mom, not about past vacations or childhood slights, but about mornings like this. The peace of starting over, even when nothing around you changes. We didn't make promises, but we talked about another vacation. Next year, maybe. Will you ever come back? Lauren asked. I smiled, letting the question linger like sea mist before sunrise. Maybe, if there's a seat for me. She reached into her bag and pulled out a small velvet box, hesitating only slightly before setting it on the table between us. I didn't touch it. They had these bracelets made last year, she said, eyes not meeting mine. For everyone. Yours was supposed to be mailed, but... She swallowed. I kept it, hoping I'd earn it back. The box was warm from her hand. I opened it. Inside was a delicate silver chain with a tiny engraved charm. Clark 2023. Family first. The irony didn't sting like it would have days ago. It just registered. Like a story you've heard enough times to no longer flinch from. I didn't put it on, but I didn't push it away either. After she left, I stayed on the terrace. Let the tea go cold. Opened the box of letters I'd written to myself before coming here. The ones I'd mailed ahead as some kind of emotional breadcrumb trail. Most of them were brief. Reminders, affirmations, a few bitter jabs in neat handwriting. But the last one, the one I'd saved, was folded with unusual care. I opened it. I am enough, even when I'm not invited. I smiled. Then, slowly, deliberately, I tore it in half. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like something had been taken from me. I felt like something had been returned. They say family is forever, but no one tells you what to do when forever starts to feel like a life sentence you never agreed to. For years, I convinced myself that their silence wasn't cruelty, just oversight. That their cold shoulders weren't rejection, just forgetfulness. That being left off the invite, the gift list, the conversation, wasn't intentional. I excused every wound with logic that served them more than it ever served me. I smiled through dinner tables where my voice never made it past the salad course. I paid for flights, rooms, and gifts that were never acknowledged. I swallowed birthdays forgotten, anniversaries skipped, and promises quietly unkept. I played the good daughter, the supportive sister, the ever-present fallback, until the weight of my own presence began to feel like a burden I was expected to carry alone. But there comes a moment when pretending costs more than being honest. And for me, that moment arrived in a hotel lobby drenched in sunlight and indifference. No room, no seat. No question asked about why I wasn't there. Just the same old assumptions, the same old script. She's just dramatic. She should have double-checked. She always makes things harder than they need to be. That week was supposed to be a vacation. Instead, it became a reckoning. I didn't throw a scene. I didn't raise my voice or demand apologies. I simply removed myself from the theater where I was always expected to play the fool. I packed the same suitcase I had carried full of hope and repacked it with dignity. What they never realized, what they never even bothered to ask, was that I had built a world outside of them. A world where my name meant something. Where I was seen, heard, and respected. Where my value wasn't negotiated at the family dinner table or weighed against someone else's comfort. At Viridian Heights, I wasn't the difficult one. I was Ms. Clark, a returning guest, a woman with history and future and agency. The staff called me by name, not out of obligation, but recognition. And somehow that quiet respect did more to heal me than years of pretending things were fine ever could. When they showed up, smiling, half remorseful, speaking in tones dipped in guilt and hope, I didn't slam the door. I just didn't open it all the way. Because sometimes boundaries aren't about punishment. They're about clarity. About declaring, without rage or apology, that you will no longer participate in your own erasure. Lauren asked to come back alone. She cried. Not performatively, not for attention, but because she had finally stopped assuming I was unbreakable. And that was the beginning of something. Not new, but honest. Not perfect, but possible. We talked that morning without blaming or posturing. She asked questions. I gave answers. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She simply returned something she had held on to, hoping one day she might be ready to deserve it. The bracelet wasn't magic. It didn't undo the past. But it marked a crack in the wall. A moment when one of them saw me not as the problem, but as a person. And maybe that's the whole point. This story isn't about revenge. It's not about grand gestures or dramatic finales. It's about reclamation. About knowing deep in your bones that being forgotten doesn't mean being unworthy, and that walking away isn't the same as giving up. Sometimes it's how you remember yourself, because the truth is, justice doesn't always arrive in courtrooms or headlines. Sometimes it walks into a hotel lobby and asks for a room under your real name. And when that moment comes, when you choose yourself fully without asking for permission, it echoes louder than any apology ever could. So here's what I know now. You don't have to stay where you're tolerated. You don't have to keep proving your worth to those who refuse to see it. And you are never obligated to shrink just so others can feel tall beside you. Like the final chord of a long-forgotten melody, justice may arrive late, but once heard, it changes the entire tune. I am not bitter. I am not broken. I am simply, finally, unafraid to leave the table when love is no longer being served. And perhaps the next time someone forgets to save me a seat, I'll just build the table myself. If this story found you, whether in the silence between texts, the empty seat at dinner, or the long pause after another unmet promise, I hope you know, you don't need permission to be whole. You don't need their seat to have a place. If you've ever outgrown a role they kept casting you in, drop A in the comments. Tell me where you're watching from, because stories like this deserve to be felt beyond the family table. Subscribe for more narratives that honor quiet strength, soft exits, and the loud echo of choosing yourself. You are not too much. You were simply never meant to fit inside the silence they offered. Thank you for being here. Your story still matters, even if they never asked for it.